She was young, beautiful, and gifted with a voice that could melt hearts. At just 24 years old, Tammi Terrell left this world after enduring 8 brain surgeries, yet her duets with Marvin Gaye still echo as timeless treasures. From Ain't No Mountain High Enough to You're All I Need to Get By, her voice carried hope, passion, and soul. But behind the radiant smile was a woman living through pain, abuse, and an industry that didn't protect her. Why was such a rare talent overlooked, and why did history let her name fade while others rose higher? This is the tragic yet inspiring journey of a star who deserved so much more. Let's get into her story right now. Thomasina Winifred Montgomery, the world would come to know her as Tammi Terrell, was born on the 29th of April, 1945, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. From the very start, her life was marked by both promise and pain. She grew up in a working-class African-American family, the daughter of Jenny and Thomas Montgomery. Her father was a barbershop owner, her mother worked in the community, and together they tried to provide a stable home. Yet beneath the surface, Tammy's childhood was filled with turbulence that would shape both her strength and her vulnerabilities. As a young girl, Tammi displayed a magnetic energy. She was quick to laugh, quick to dance, and even quicker to sing. Family members recalled that she would stand on the front porch and sing to anyone passing by, treating the sidewalk like it was the Apollo stage. But behind that bright smile, her world wasn't always kind. At just 11 years old, Tammi endured traumatic experiences that left scars far deeper than anyone could see. In later years, people close to her believed those early wounds contributed to her choices in relationships, gravitating toward older men who didn't always treat her well. Still, her voice became her escape. By the time she was in junior high, Tammi was entering talent shows around Philadelphia. She had the rare kind of voice that could be both sweet and powerful, playful yet commanding. Audiences loved her, and she loved the stage. It was the one place where she could control her destiny. Philadelphia in the late 1950s was alive with gospel choirs, doo-wop groups, and the early rumblings of soul music. For a teenager like Tammi, it was a training ground, and she soaked up every note. At just 13, she caught the attention of producers and began recording under the name Tammi Montgomery. Imagine being barely a teenager and already stepping into professional studios, rubbing shoulders with grown musicians. She wasn't intimidated, she belonged there. Her first single, If You See Bill, released in 1961, may not have topped the charts, but it showed that this young girl was serious about her craft. She had the determination of someone twice her age. Yet, growing up in the music industry as a young black woman was not easy. The industry at that time was filled with predatory figures, and Tammi was not shielded from them. Some of her earliest professional experiences involved being taken advantage of by older, powerful men. These traumas would follow her, but they never fully dimmed her light. In fact, they made her hunger for success burn even brighter. Singing was not just her talent, it was her survival. By her teenage years, Tammi was already performing with legends. In 1963, she joined James Brown's Revue for live performances. To the outside world, this was an incredible opportunity being mentored by the godfather of soul himself. But inside, Tammy's life grew more complicated. Reports and later accounts suggest James Brown was abusive, and Tammi became one of many young women who endured mistreatment under his control. The stage gave her applause, but behind the curtain, her spirit was being tested. Despite the hardships, she kept shining. When she returned to Philadelphia, Tammi enrolled at the University of Pennsylvania for pre-med studies. Yes, beneath all the glamour, she had dreams of becoming a doctor. It shows just how multidimensional she was. A young woman balancing her passion for music with a genuine desire to heal and help others. Still, music pulled her back. The studio lights, the crowds, the sound of her own voice echoing through speakers, it was too powerful to resist. In the mid-1960s, she signed with Checker Records and later with Wand Records, releasing singles that showcased her range and personality. She wasn't just another singer trying to copy the Motown sound. She had a vibrancy all her own. But the industry wasn't quick to hand her a crown. Her songs didn't always chart, and she often found herself in the shadow of bigger names. For a young woman as talented as Tammi, this constant fight for recognition only deepened the feeling of being underrated. What's striking is how, Even in those early years, people who met her remembered her warmth. She wasn't only a singer, she was a friend, a sister, someone who could light up a room with her presence. In a world that often objectified women, especially in the music business, Tammi had a spark that couldn't be reduced to just her looks. She was intelligent, outspoken, and carried herself with a grace that set her apart. Her early life was a blend of contradictions, applause and abuse, opportunity and exploitation, ambition and vulnerability. These contrasts would define the rest of her short journey. While other teenagers were worrying about high school dances, Tammi was navigating the cutthroat world of show business, while still trying to be a young girl from Philadelphia with dreams bigger than her neighborhood. Looking back, you can see how everything was preparing her for the storm and the glory ahead. Her childhood pain gave her songs depth. Her youthful ambition gave her the courage to walk into any room, and her unshakable spirit made people believe she was destined for greatness. The tragedy is that the world didn't give her enough time to fully blossom. But even as a teenager, Tammi Terrell had already proven she was more than just another pretty face in the Motown machine. She was a star in the making, waiting for her story to be told. By the mid-1960s, Tammi Terrell had already lived the kind of life that could fill a book. She had endured trauma, fought her way through an unforgiving industry, and still managed to stand out with a voice that demanded attention. But her true rise in music began when she caught the ear of the legendary Motown machine. In 1965, while still recording under her birth name, Tammy Montgomery, she attracted the attention of Berry Gordy, the mastermind behind Motown Records. Gordy had a gift for spotting raw talent, and when he heard her sing, he saw more than just another voice. He saw potential for greatness. Gordy signed her to Motown, and it was here that she was reborn as Tammi Terrell. The new name, the new label, and the new direction would set the stage for the most impactful chapter of her career. At Motown, Tammi was surrounded by some of the biggest stars of the era: Diana Ross and the Supremes, The Temptations, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder. It was intimidating territory for a newcomer, but Tammi didn't shrink. She had already stood on stage with James Brown. She knew how to hold her ground. What set her apart was her ability to connect emotionally with audiences. She didn't just sing a song, she lived inside it, delivering every lyric like it was pulled straight from her heart. Her first solo singles at Motown showed promise, though they didn't climb the charts the way Gordy had hoped. Songs like I Can't Believe You Love Me in 1965 gave a glimpse of her potential, with its aching vulnerability wrapped in a strong vocal delivery. Even though she wasn't an immediate hit, those who listened closely could hear the magic in her tone. Tammy's voice had a purity and power that could stand toe-to-toe with anyone on the Motown roster. During this period, Tammi also began building her reputation as a live performer. Audiences were drawn to her natural charisma. She was stylish, radiant, and could light up a room with just a smile. There was something relatable about her, too. She didn't come across as untouchable like some stars, but as someone you might know, someone you could root for. That relatability would become one of her strongest assets when Motown started experimenting with duet pairings. Behind the scenes, life at Motown wasn't always glamorous. Competition was fierce, and female artists especially had to fight for space in a label dominated by superstar names. Tammi, often overlooked in the press compared to Diana Ross or Martha Reeves, represented what it meant to be underrated in plain sight. She had the same fire, the same presence, but lacked the industry push. Still, what she did have was undeniable talent and a willingness to give everything she had to her craft. In the mid-1960s, a key turning point arrived. Motown needed a partner for Marvin Gaye. Marvin, already a rising star, had been paired with other female vocalists, but none quite clicked the way the label hoped. When Gordy placed Tammi with Marvin, it was like striking gold. Their chemistry was instant, both on and off stage. From the very first notes they recorded together, you could feel something extraordinary happening. For Tammi, this was her chance to break free from the shadows. She wasn't just another singer trying to find her place, she had found her lane. The stage was set, the lights were ready, and her voice was about to carry her into history. When Tammi Terrell first stepped into the studio with Marvin Gaye in 1967, no one could have predicted the kind of magic that was about to unfold. Marvin was already established, known for his smooth, soulful delivery. Tammi, on the other hand, was still searching for that one big break. What happened when their voices met was nothing short of legendary. The first track they recorded together was Ain't No Mountain High Enough, written by the powerhouse duo Ashford and Simpson. From the opening lines, it was clear something special was happening. Marvin's velvet tone met Tammi's bright, spirited vocals in perfect harmony. The chemistry felt natural, effortless, like two old friends finishing each other's sentences in song. When the single dropped, it soared up the charts and quickly became one of Motown's defining anthems. For Tammi, it was a breakthrough. After years of being overlooked, suddenly the spotlight was shining directly on her. Her name was on the radio, her picture was in magazines, and audiences across the country were falling in love with the sound of Marvin and Tammi. Together, they became the duo everyone wanted to see. What made their pairing so powerful wasn't just the music, it was the energy they brought to the stage. Marvin was famously shy in live performances, often reserved and hesitant to fully let go. Tammi changed that. With her bubbly personality and radiant smile, she pulled Marvin out of his shell. On stage, she would tease him, dance with him, lean into him, and the crowd went wild. She gave him confidence, and in return, he gave her the platform she had been waiting for. Their connection was pure joy, and audiences could feel it. The hits kept coming, Your Precious Love, If I Could Build My Whole World Around You, and later, If This World Were Mine. Each song showcased not just vocal skill, but a deep sense of intimacy. Fans began to speculate, were they secretly in love? Was there more to the story than just music? Marvin himself admitted years later that while he cared deeply for Tammi, their bond was built more on friendship and mutual respect than romance. Still, their undeniable chemistry blurred those lines in the eyes of the public. Offstage, Tammi was still navigating a difficult personal life. Her relationships with men like David Ruffin of The Temptations were turbulent, filled with highs and painful lows. Yet whenever she stepped into the studio with Marvin, it was like none of that mattered. The music became her sanctuary, a place where she could shine without fear. For Marvin, Tammi was a blessing. She re-energized his career, gave him a new artistic partner, and reminded him of the joy of simply making music. For Tammi, Marvin was a safe place, a man who didn't exploit her, but uplifted her. Together, they became Motown's golden pair, capturing lightning in a bottle with every track. By the late 1960s, Tammi Terrell had finally arrived. No longer the young girl struggling to be noticed, she was now half of a legendary duo whose songs would define an era. But even as her star rose higher than ever, fate was preparing to throw a devastating twist her way. By 1967 and 1968, Marvin Gaye and Tammi Terrell had become Motown's shining duo. Their duets weren't just songs, they were moments of pure connection that defined an era. With each release, they carved their names deeper into the fabric of soul music. For Tammi, this was the long-awaited breakthrough, the moment when the world finally recognized the gift she had been carrying since childhood. Ain't No Mountain High Enough had already set the tone, but it was far from the end. Your Precious Love followed, hitting the top of the R&B charts and crossing over to the pop world. Then came If I Could Build My Whole World Around You, where Marvin and Tammi traded verses like two hearts speaking directly to each other. Their voices blended in a way that felt more like a conversation than a performance. It was tender, it was romantic, and it made listeners believe in love again. Perhaps the most personal of their hits was If This World Were Mine, written by Marvin himself. In it, he gifted Tammi some of her most memorable lines. The way she sang them hopeful, sweet, yet powerful made the track unforgettable. To many fans, it felt like Marvin had written the song just for her. It became a wedding classic, a love anthem that still resonates today. What made their duets groundbreaking wasn't only the music, but the timing. America in the late 1960s was a nation in turmoil. The civil rights movement was at its peak, cities were burning, and voices for change were rising across the country. Amid that chaos, Marvin and Tammi represented something hopeful: Black love, unity, and harmony, broadcast over the airwaves. Their songs weren't political anthems, but they carried a quiet revolution showing joy, tenderness, and equality between a man and a woman at a time when those images mattered deeply. In a world where Motown often pushed glamour and polish, Marvin and Tammi felt authentic. They weren't as carefully staged as Diana Ross and the Supremes, or as heavily marketed as the Jackson 5 would later be. Instead, their appeal came from raw chemistry. Watching them perform, audiences believed what they saw. That authenticity made them stand out, even among Motown's crowded roster. Still, even as her voice graced the airwaves, Tammi's recognition lagged behind. Marvin was already an established star, and much of the press focused on him as the leading figure. Tammi was often mentioned as Marvin Gaye's duet partner, rather than a star in her own right. It was another layer of injustice in her story. Despite being half of the reason those songs soared, she remained underrated. But inside the hearts of fans, Tammi was unforgettable. Young women saw her as a symbol of strength and style. Young men adored her beauty and spirit. Her smile was as famous as her voice. Together with Marvin, she wasn't just making records, she was shaping memories, embedding herself into the soundtrack of people's lives. The late 1960 should have been the beginning of a long reign for Tammi Terrell. She was at the top of her game, delivering hit after hit, finally basking in the applause she had always deserved. But as history has shown us time and time again, when the lights shine brightest, the shadows often grow darker. And for Tammi, that darkness was closer than anyone realized. With hit after hit pouring out of Motown, Marvin Gaye and Tammi Terrell became one of the label's brightest attractions. Their duets weren't just studio magic, they translated seamlessly to the stage. On tour, they were electric. Audiences across the country packed theaters and arenas just to see the way Marvin and Tammi lit up a stage together. On television, their charm was undeniable. When they appeared on variety shows, fans could see the same playful chemistry that made their records so irresistible. Marvin, often shy and reserved, seemed completely at ease whenever Tammi was by his side. She laughed, she teased, she pulled him out of his shell. The banter between them felt spontaneous, not scripted, and that authenticity connected deeply with audiences. For many viewers, it wasn't just about the music, it was about witnessing a partnership that looked like genuine love, even if, in reality, it was built on deep friendship. Motown executives recognized the draw. They booked the duo for high-profile appearances and made sure their images were splashed across promotional posters. But despite the growing fame, something was off. The recognition wasn't evenly shared. Marvin was consistently spotlighted as the star, while Tammi was often referred to as his partner, rather than as an artist with her own identity. This imbalance reflected the broader dynamics of the music industry, where women, especially black women, were too often treated as supporting players. Still, Tammi never let that diminish her shine. On stage, she radiated joy. She danced with Marvin like no one else existed, yet still found a way to connect with every member of the audience. Fans often said that seeing Tammi perform felt like watching a friend chase her dreams. She was glamorous, yes, but also approachable. That balance made her unique in a field crowded with polished stars. As the late 1960 rolled on, comparisons began to surface. Critics noted that Marvin and Tammi's duets rivaled some of the great male-female pairings in music history. People spoke of them in the same breath as Sonny and Cher, or later Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. But here's where the injustice lay. While others were celebrated as equals, Tammi was rarely given the same credit. Her name didn't always appear as boldly in headlines, and her role in creating the duo's magic was often understated. Among Motown insiders, however, there was no denying her importance. Marvin himself would later say that Tammi was the one who reignited his love for performing. Before her, he often felt nervous and disconnected on stage. With her, he felt alive, free, and understood. That alone speaks volumes about the impact she had, not just on audiences, but on one of Motown's greatest icons. By this time, Tammi Terrell had transformed from a teenage hopeful into a national sensation. Her voice was on the radio, her smile was on television, and her presence was woven into the cultural fabric of the moment. She was proof that perseverance could pay off, that even someone who had been overlooked and underrated could rise to brilliance. And yet, just as Tammi was reaching her peak, the shadows of her past and the weight of her health struggles began to catch up with her. The applause was loud, the lights were bright, but behind the curtain, storm clouds were gathering. The breakthrough that should have marked the start of a long reign was, tragically, the beginning of her final chapter. For all the joy that Tammi Terrell projected on stage, her personal life behind the scenes was marked by deep struggles. The very industry that celebrated her voice often turned a blind eye to the pain she endured. And the men in her life, some of them giants in music history, left scars that no chart-topping duet could erase. Her relationship with David Ruffin of The Temptations was one of the most troubling chapters. At first, Tammi was charmed by his confidence and charisma. He was already a star, with a voice that had captivated millions, and for a young woman still searching for stability, his attention must have felt intoxicating. But the romance quickly soured. Friends and family recalled how David could be controlling, even violent. Stories circulated of physical abuse, and Tammi often confided in loved ones about the chaos she faced. What should have been a loving partnership became another source of pain, further compounding the trauma she carried from her teenage years. Then there was her earlier time with James Brown, which had also been marred by reports of abuse and manipulation. Instead of being mentored and protected, Tammi found herself at the mercy of powerful men who saw her more as property than as a human being. These experiences chipped away at her sense of safety, leaving her vulnerable even as her star was rising. But the cruelest blow was yet to come, not from a person, but from her own body. In 1967, during a performance at Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia, Tammi collapsed on stage into Marvin Gaye's arms. At first, the crowd thought it was part of the act, but the truth was far more devastating. She had been suffering from severe headaches for months, and this frightening episode revealed the seriousness of her condition. Doctors soon diagnosed her with a brain tumor. Imagine being only 22 years old, standing at the peak of your career, and being told that your life was suddenly in jeopardy. For Tammi, the diagnosis was both shocking and cruel. She had just begun to taste the recognition she deserved, only to be confronted with a battle for survival. Despite the grim news, Tammi didn't stop fighting. She underwent surgery, determined to continue performing and recording. Her resilience was astonishing. Just months after collapsing, she was back in the studio with Marvin, laying down tracks that remain classics today. To her fans, she seemed unstoppable, but those closest to her knew the truth. Every smile hid pain, every performance was a victory against her own body. This period of her life captures the heartbreaking duality of Tammi Terrell. To the world, she was radiant, one half of Motown's golden duo. But behind the music, she was a young woman enduring abuse, betrayal, and a devastating illness. Her story reminds us of the thin line between glory and tragedy, and how even the brightest stars can burn under the weight of unseen battles. After her collapse on stage and the devastating diagnosis of a brain tumor, Tammi Terrell's life became a battle of survival. Over the next 3 years, she endured 8 separate brain surgeries. Each one carried the hope of buying her more time, yet each left her weaker than before. Imagine the courage it took for a young woman, barely in her 20s, to face repeated operations while the world still expected her to shine like a star. In between surgeries, Tammi tried to keep singing. Music was her lifeline, the one thing that gave her joy amid the pain. She returned to the studio with Marvin Gaye to record more duets, and remarkably, some of their most enduring songs came during this period. Tracks like "You're All I Need to Get By" carried not just melody, but resilience. When you listen closely, you can almost hear Tammi pouring every ounce of strength into her vocals, as if she knew time was slipping away. Her appearances, however, grew fewer. The once bubbly performer who lit up stages was now often confined to hospitals and bed rest. Friends and colleagues noticed her energy fading, though she always tried to maintain her trademark smile. Marvin Gaye, who had grown deeply attached to Tammi, was devastated. He visited her often, and those who witnessed their interactions said he treated her with tenderness and respect, qualities that set him apart from many others in her life. For Marvin, Tammi wasn't just a duet partner, she was family. Despite her determination, Tammi's condition worsened. By 1969, the tumor had taken a severe toll on her body. She struggled with paralysis, weight loss, and constant pain. Yet through it all, she refused to give in to despair. She joked with friends, leaned on her family, and continued to talk about her dreams, even when she knew she might never see them fulfilled. That unbreakable spirit is what her loved ones remembered most. On the 16th of March 1970, Tammi Terrell passed away at just 24 years old. The news sent shockwaves through the music world. For fans, it was heartbreaking to lose such a radiant talent so soon. For Marvin Gaye, it was a personal catastrophe. Many close to him said he never fully recovered from her death. In fact, some believe the grief over losing Tammi played a role in the creation of his masterpiece, What's Going On, the following year. A record filled with sorrow, hope, and questions about life and justice. Tammi's funeral in Philadelphia was a somber affair, attended by family, friends, and fellow artists. Marvin Gaye delivered the eulogy, breaking down in tears as he honored the woman who had changed his life. The sight of Marvin weeping over Tammi's coffin became one of the most haunting images of Motown's history. Her death marked the tragic end of a life that should have soared far higher. Instead of years of stardom, she left behind only a brief but unforgettable legacy. Tammi Terrell's story reminds us of the fragility of life, the cruelty of fate, and the price of being both brilliant and vulnerable in a world that too often fails to protect its brightest stars. When Tammi Terrell's life ended in 1970, it might have seemed like her voice would fade with her. She had been only 24, her career cut short before she could fully bloom. And yet, more than 5 decades later, her songs continue to breathe life into radio stations, wedding playlists, movie soundtracks, and the hearts of fans around the world. The music she created with Marvin Gaye has proven to be timeless. Ain't No Mountain High Enough is now considered one of the greatest duets in American music history. It has been featured in films, commercials, and even sports arenas, carrying with it the energy of 2 young singers who recorded it with joy and sincerity. Songs like You're All I Need to Get By and If This World Were Mine remain staples at weddings, anniversaries, and celebrations of love. Even people who may not know Tammi's name instantly recognize her voice when the opening lines play. That is the true mark of legacy when the art outlives the artist. Beyond the music itself, Tammi's impact rippled outward to influence generations of performers. Female artists, especially those who followed in the soul and R&B tradition, often pointed to her as a symbol of resilience and brilliance. Singers like Mary J. Blige, Alicia Keys, and Beyoncé have cited the Motown era as inspiration, and Tammi's duets stand as a blueprint for how vulnerability and strength can coexist in music. Her ability to project sweetness without losing power gave future singers permission to embrace both tenderness and authority in their voices. Another layer of her legacy comes from the relationship she had with Marvin Gaye. For Marvin, Tammi was not only a collaborator but a muse. Her presence reignited his passion for performance, and her loss left him shattered. In many ways, the grief he carried after her passing shaped the direction of his later work. Without Tammi, it's possible the world would never have received What's Going On, a record born from heartbreak, empathy, and searching for meaning. In this way, Tammi's spirit lives within one of the most important albums in music history. Over time, fans began to rediscover her story. While Motown celebrated its biggest stars, Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, the Temptations, there was a growing recognition that Tammi had been overlooked. Documentaries, tribute concerts, and retrospectives in magazines helped to restore her name. Younger generations, stumbling upon her duets through movies like Remember the Titans or through viral videos online, discovered not just Marvin Gaye, but the woman who stood beside him and matched him note for note. Perhaps what makes Tammi's legacy so moving is how short her career was, yet how lasting her influence remains. She recorded fewer songs than many of her peers, but nearly every one of them carried weight. There is no filler in her discography, only gems that continue to sparkle. And when fans speak of her today, they rarely talk just about her voice. They speak of her spirit, her smile, the way she lifted Marvin on stage, and the way she made listeners feel like they were part of something special. Tammi Terrell may have been underrated in her time, but history is beginning to correct itself. Each time her songs are played, her name echoes louder, ensuring that her light will never go out. While Marvin Gaye went on to become a global icon crowned the Prince of Motown and the Prince of Soul, Tammi Terrell's name was often left in the shadows. When people celebrated Motown anniversaries or listed its greatest stars, Marvin's name appeared in bold print, but Tammi's was frequently relegated to a footnote. This imbalance is one of the greatest injustices of her story. She was not simply Marvin's partner. She was an artist in her own right, with a unique voice and a spirit that made those duets unforgettable. Without her, the magic would not have been the same. Over the years, fans have fought to keep her memory alive. In comment sections, on fan pages, and through tribute performances, they remind the world that Tammi was not just Marvin Gaye's duet partner. She was Tammi Terrell, an individual talent whose life was tragically cut short. That passion from her supporters has sparked ongoing conversations about why her story has not yet been fully told on the big screen. The call for a biopic about Tammi has been loud and persistent. Many fans argue that her life filled with triumph, trauma, love, and tragedy deserves cinematic treatment. Again and again, Taraji P. Henson's name surfaces as the perfect actress to portray her. The resemblance is striking, and Taraji's proven ability to capture both vulnerability and strength makes her a fan favorite for the role. Some argue that casting a new face could also honor Tammi by introducing a fresh talent. But either way, the desire for a film shows just how deeply people want her story to be remembered. What's also telling is how Tammi has become a symbol of what it means to be underrated. She embodies the artists who gave everything, whose talent was undeniable, but who never received the recognition they earned in their lifetimes. Her narrative resonates with anyone who has ever felt overlooked or underestimated. It's why her songs feel so personal, not just love duets, but anthems of longing, resilience, and hope. Her image continues to inspire. Fashion enthusiasts admire her classic Motown-style sleek dresses, perfect hair, radiant smile. Musicians study her recordings to understand how she balanced power and gentleness in her delivery. Historians point to her story as an example of the pressures faced by women in the music industry, particularly young black women navigating fame in the 1960s. Even in death, Tammi's influence on Marvin Gaye's career is undeniable. Many believe that without her loss, Marvin might never have channeled his grief into the masterpiece What's Going On. In that sense, Tammi's spirit helped shape one of the greatest albums of all time. She may not have lived to see the recognition, but her fingerprint is there, pressed into the DNA of soul music. Today, Tammi Terrell stands as a haunting reminder of both the beauty and the fragility of life in the spotlight. She was radiant, gifted, and gone far too soon. But the love her fans continue to show, the endless replays of her duets, and the growing calls for her to be honored properly ensure that she will never truly be forgotten. Tammi Terrell may not have been crowned during her lifetime, but in the hearts of those who cherish her voice, she is nothing less than royalty. Tammi Terrell's story is one of breathtaking beauty and heartbreaking tragedy. She was a young woman whose voice could lift spirits and whose smile could light up a room, yet whose life was marked by pain, betrayal, and a devastating illness that stole her far too soon. At just 24 years old, she left this world, but not before gifting us songs that remain eternal. When you listen to Ain't No Mountain High Enough, you don't just hear two singers, you hear a promise of love that cannot be broken. When you play You're All I Need to Get By, you feel the depth of devotion, the warmth of unity. And when Marvin Gaye poured his grief into What's Going On, Tammi's presence was there, hovering like a spirit guiding his voice. Her life reminds us of the razor-thin line between glory and sorrow in the world of music. On one side, the applause, the bright lights, and the unforgettable performances. On the other, the loneliness, the exploitation, the illness, and the silence that followed her passing. Tammi's journey was both a triumph and a cautionary tale, one that forces us to ask how many other voices were lost because the industry did not care enough to protect them. Yet despite the tragedy, Tammi's legacy endures. She may not have received the recognition she deserved during her lifetime, but today, her name carries weight. Fans old and new continue to celebrate her, to replay her duets, to imagine what could have been. She is proof that even when history tries to overlook someone, true talent cannot be erased. So we end with a question. If Tammi Terrell had lived, would she stand today alongside Aretha Franklin, Patti LaBelle, and Gladys Knight as one of the great queens of soul? Or was her destiny always to shine brightly for a brief moment, leaving behind a legacy that feels even more precious because of its brevity? One thing is certain: Tammi Terrell's voice, her spirit, and her story will never be forgotten. Her time on earth was short, but in the hearts of those who love music, Tammi lives forever.